Welcome to the Your Leadership Legacy podcast. My name is Tina Paulus Krause, and I'm so excited to bring you this next podcast dedicated to you high performers out there who want to reinvent yourself, reinvent your business, maybe your career, all of it. This podcast is all about being dedicated to transformation and being the best possible leader of yourself and others that you can be in order to create a legacy that lives on. Welcome to Your Leadership Legacy. My name is Tina Paulus Krause. I am the founder and CEO of True You Teams. And here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to Your Leadership Legacy. My name is Tina Paulus Krause, and I'm super excited. I've got Stan Slovin on the show today. Hey Stan, how are you?
Good, Tina. Thanks for having me on Leadership Legacy. Awesome.
Yeah, I've been excited to meet you. I love your bio. I love everything about you. You're from the financial industry and all that good stuff. So I would love for you just to introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about who Stan Slovin is.
Wow. Okay. We have enough time for that or no? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So first of all, so
long.
Stan Slovin, I am in Chicago, Illinois, the wonderful Midwest, and I have been in the also area of wealth management for 31 years. So I've really, grew up in the Chicagoland area, went to school, in the Illinois. I also have a law background, so hopefully no one in your audience takes that for, it doesn't hold that against me.
Yeah.
But interesting is that for the last 31 years, I've been really working on building a career and building just a business around relationships. And what's really interesting is that, when you are learning about so many different people and you're trying to help them, and try to help them accomplish their goals and everything, you learn quickly what's really important to them. But you also realize that sometimes you're maybe not hearing everything that they're trying to accomplish, or you're not letting them empty their bucket, or maybe we as great advisors just keep cutting people off all the time. And this is where kind of over the last, 10 years, I was realizing that, boy, I was kind of doing it all wrong for so long.
How did you realize that? Like, how did you become aware of that?
I think people were telling me, like, hey, you're not listening, or hey, you're just not getting this, or I don't think that you're really following what we're trying to figure out. It sounds like it's more your agenda, not our agenda. And, maybe, can you just kind of listen a little bit more, and it's eye-opening because one, you have to have the thick skin to be able to take that. And two, you have to be ready to take that and turn it into a positive. And I thought that it was really crucial, not just, by the way, not just professionally, but also personally. It's really important.
Absolutely. Before we hit record, I said the phrase, are you listening to understand or are you listening to respond? And you said that you have this in your book as well. So talk to us about your book and tell us what the difference is between listening to understand versus listening to respond.
Right. Yeah. So it's one of the best quotes ever. Better listening is the name of the book. That's what it looks like. Better listening. So better listening really came from the world that we needed. We needed something like this. I just truly believe that the world was busy. We're multitasking. Our attention spans are really short, and we're constantly just distracted because we don't have our patience runs very, very thin. Plus, also what's going on in the world today, politics and culture and just everything that's happening. We have such a challenging, sometimes even divisive society that everybody's like just talking, and the listening is really just they're listening to respond, as opposed to like what you said, listening to understand. So that's really where the book came from, or where the concept came from, and that was how do we have a more meaningful dialogue? How do we have a more impactful conversation, right? And how do we have more of a deeper discussion?
Yeah, all with the intention to build what you talked about in the very beginning, the relationship, right? Like it's all about maintaining the relationship and building that relationship. So how did you, like when you became aware of this, when people started to say, hey, you're not listening, how did you go through the process to learn a different way?
So, it always comes up, and that is better listening like is it a natural trait or is it a learned trait? And I'm in the camp of it's both. I think that, we really can learn, we're taught like active listening, the leaning in, the eye contact, making sure that people will really know that you're engaged. That's the active type of listening. The reflective listening, which is even the more important, is where we have to pause. That's really where I realized that there needed to be a difference, where we need to pause before responding, or at better, just pushing down the response mode to later in the conversation. That's a key, even with leaders today, is, instead of being so reactive, in their agenda, they need to pause, they need to reflect, they need to clarify, and they also need to check in. But the difference that I found, and not only for myself personally, but in, I think, the professional services industry, leadership industry, there was a lack of empathy. And that's really where the book came from, is it was taking active listening and reflective listening and putting empathy in the middle so that you would have a total listening.
Yeah. So how does someone build empathy?
Boy, isn't that it's like the golden ticket question, right?
It really is.
Empathy shows a couple things. First of all, it shows that you're taking the time to allow someone to share how they're feeling. And when we're in conversations like dinner conversations or family conversations, everyone's like, they're just competing for the time to talk. They're just jumping in. And when the person is really crying to be heard and they're asking to be heard, empathy is the tool. It's the catalyst that changes the entire conversation forever. And by the way, once you add empathy, not only will they appreciate it, but you'll appreciate it, and the relationship and the conversations will be happier conversations. So empathy, I can go, it's just one, it's allowing somebody to know that it's okay to share with them, or that they're not alone. Or, you know what, this is something that's very common out there. I hear this all the time. Tell me more. Help me understand that more. Great questions to ask when you're using empathy as part of your conversations. How does that work, or why is that so important to you? And all of a sudden, the person just empties their bucket, and it changes the way. And then they realize that you're listening to them, and they appreciate it. And it turns it into you're finally listening.
It's that matters so much. I love this conversation. So if I'm somebody who doesn't really have empathy, I don't really understand what that means, but I know that I want to grow myself. I know that I want to get there. I know that that's what's missing. But I'm always in that mode of trying to use my voice and trying to, put it like, what is it that stops? I'm trying not to give the answer as I'm asking, right? Like, what is it that stops people from taking that pause, right? Because if I'm not taking the pause, I'm immediately answering, I'm not showing empathy. It's about my agenda. So I think about in the moment, how did you practice? How did you change your way of being? What changed in order for you to create the pause? Because it's not that's the hard part, creating that pause, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that creating the pause is crucial, but most of us don't practice it. Because, and by the way, this is not new. This was when you were young at the kitchen table and your parents says, don't talk until you're talked to, or when you went to school and your teacher's like, you failed the test because you didn't follow the directions. You weren't listening, and you think to yourself, as we get older and smarter, it was only getting worse, and then you start realizing that you're in relationships with your spouse, your partner, your person and your family. And they said, you know what, you're not listening to me. You don't get it. And you just don't understand what's going on. You think to yourself, wow, that's really hard to be hearing. The pause, though, to answer, I think the question is, the pause gives the transition to say to the person, hey, before I start talking, okay, which I'm just so used to doing, if I just take a pause and listen to the person for a couple more seconds, right, I may actually learn more. That's another benefit. I may actually hear something that I wasn't thinking, and I don't need to hijack every conversation. Got a great story. I had a great feedback from the book. It was a CEO flying back and said, oh, read your book. It was great tips and blah, blah, blah. And he types, he says, but that's not the review. I get home and sit at the kitchen table with my daughter. She tells me about her troubles she had at work and the problems she's having in class. And I put that super cape on of a parent, and I'm about to answer when I thought about the book, and I paused. I asked her, wait, tell me a little bit more. What's going on? Help me understand that. Am I hearing this? And then he checked in. And then he said, listen, this is not uncommon. A lot of people have tough days. And he empathized. Then he went further and said, what else? And when they were done with the conversation, she gets up at the kitchen table, hugs the father, and says, Dad, thank you for finally listening to me.
Yeah.
Because that pause created the transition to a whole new approach.
Yeah.
And that's where, even if a person is not that empathetic, they don't have to be, but they can think in an empathetic way when having a conversation with someone. And those are some of the tips.
That's huge. That's so huge. It's so huge. It's about taking it's not about me. right? If I'm in a conversation with somebody, what I heard you say is that we're so often we want to get our word out and get what we're trying to say and push push what we're trying to say, when it's really about just holding the space for this other person and asking the open-ended questions. And so like I got goosebumps when you were telling that story, because if nothing else, your book allowed a busy CEO to go home and hug and like have a really special moment with their child. Like that's huge.
Yeah, it's a transformation for everyone. And by the way, it's not just in personal, it's also in professional and vice versa, because leaders right now, the feedback from their employees are, hey, I'm not sure if my boss or my leader is understanding or likes what I have to say or values what I have to say. And these leaders are trying to work on ways, better ways. Tips would be is to allow these employees to voice a little bit more. Tell me more. How does communication work for you? What's most important when we're working on this project? And you said, Tina, you mentioned the open-ended questions. We all know that on the show today, but we forget to practice that, and we forget how important the how and tell me when and when was this and how did that work and where does that fit. Those open ends allow the other person to actually talk. And then from there, that reflectiveness opens it up and gets deeper so that the projects are more beneficial, profitable, longer, retention of employees, all of those things work, from a leadership standpoint as well.
Yeah. Oh, such good tips, such amazing tips. I hope that leaders out there were writing down those open-ended questions. If not, go back and listen to them. So Stan, what if I'm the employee on the other side of that desk and I'm working for a leader who doesn't necessarily have those EI skills, right? Doesn't really have that not leading with the empathy questions, and all of that. What do I do in that situation? What are some questions that I could ask my leader to really get to being able to use my voice and feel like I'm a valuable contribution on the team?
Yeah, I think the reflective listening tip, the tool chest, is the most important, because I think when that employee is having conversation with the employer, they can check in by first of all clarifying. So it sounds like what you want me to do and accomplish on this is X, Y, and Z, and I'm getting the feeling that we want to do this within a timely basis. Mm-hmm. Instead of letting the employer come back and say that's correct, the employee has a great opportunity to say, so tell me a little bit more about that. I want to make sure that we're clear, so we're all on the same page, so we can collaborate, so we can do this as a team effort. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding where you're coming from. They will then clarify, which then the employee will actually hear a couple different things, and they're going to realize, okay, now I have the employer or my leader in a conversation. Let's empathize with them. You know what? This sounds like it's a project that it's going to be beneficial to the firm, to the project, to the association. And that's going to make us really be stronger and more resilient, or more, whatever the goal is. So let me ask, and then the next question, the last one is, so what else? What else can we be doing? What else can I do so we're on the same page? So those reflective questions and clarifications will get the employer or the leader to be more engaged. The employee will feel that now we're clearer, we've emphasized, so now we have the feeling, we checked in, and then now we're moving more together, in a stronger, cohesive effort.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love. So your book is called Better Listening. When you're saying clarify, you're saying check in. I'm hearing a process here. So talk to me about the process. There has to be a process here that you're using as you go through this.
Well, I mean, the process, and in fact, I think I always say this, everyone's a good listener, because if I said everyone's a bad listener, no one would read the book, okay? So we're all good listeners already, okay? Yeah. We could just be like better listeners, okay? And really to do that, it's really a couple things. Number one, the world is full of distractions. We know the cell phone. We know we're looking at a notes. We know we have everything in front of us. It's really important to try to be in the present. That's a great message to take away today. Be in the present when you're talking to someone. Okay, it only takes a few minutes to really be in the present. It also takes 2 or 3 seconds to show someone else you're not in the present. Yeah. And that really has an effect on that relationship. So from a distraction standpoint, try to minimize, or if you're going to use a cell, let the person know, hey, I may have to check just to let you know, is that okay? Here's another great one. Have them with the question, the proactive question. Listen, here's a great story. You come home, right, and your friend or your roommate or your spouse or your partner says, "Oh, this was a crazy day. It was horrible." And you're like, "Well, let me tell you what went wrong. Let me help you, okay?" And you're like all of a sudden solving, right? And they laugh and they're like, wait, I didn't want your opinion. I just wanted you to listen. I just wanted to vent. So a great question, both professional and personal, is to jump in and say, listen, I'm hearing what you're saying. And it sounds like there's a lot going on. Do you want me to just continue to listen and let you just share this? Or would you want some observation? Or do you want me to share just a thought? And they'll tell you. They'll actually tell you, they'll tell you. So process of better listening is using active listening. Okay, using reflective, we just talked about that. That's the, reflecting, clarifying, empathizing, checking in, and then responding, okay? And then putting in empathy. In fact, if everyone could just remember just a little bit more empathy into the conversations, will just change how every conversation moving forward will go. So that's really the process, total listening, those three elements.
Yeah, amazing. Talk a little bit about, what I'm hearing you say is that I used to not be a good listener. I now have these tools in my toolbox, right? That I am a good listener. So how has that changed relationships, both personally and professionally for you in your life?
For me, well, I mean, first of all, the dinner parties are now all changed. I'll tell you, because, it's funny, when I drive home and my wife looks at me, we're talking and she says something about our kids and I jump in, she goes, wait a minute, you wrote the book on better listening. You're not listening. Okay. You're not listening and you wrote the book. Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
we all still do it, but
it's busy. It's noisy out there.
It's noisy out there. And really the great thing to think about is, one, you may be, again, at that dinner party, okay, someone's telling the story. Don't jump in and hijack the conversation, okay? You don't have to explain to them why you have to now jump in. Let the person enjoy the story. The trip is my famous one. You just got back from Barcelona. Oh, I was at Barcelona. Oh, Tina, I was at Barcelona. Also, we had a great time. Let me tell you that. And first of all, you're like, wait a minute. I did not even let the person share their trip. Because I had to jump in and explain how great my trip at Barcelona, was. So those are the times where you kind of want to think about, one, try to not let someone, run short on what they're trying to share. So not hijacking, number one, pausing and listening. Clarifying, letting a person go on a little bit, because they may want to empty their bucket. They may have something, and it's important for you to hear, because then it makes it easier for you then to respond when you have a deeper. Here's another thing. Leaders, another problem. Leaders live their day by surface conversations. I say something, you get a response. I bring something up, you get a response. And this surface relationship of leaders are missing there's a great book called Good to Great. It defines from good leaders to great leaders. And they talk about that good leaders run great companies. Great leaders listen. And that is a key takeaway. And that is our leaders have to move from just surface conversation, and they have to go deeper. And in order for them to go deeper, they have to either instigate it by helping that, or they have to allow someone else to do it. And
they get to allow themselves to go deeper. I mean, I see that a lot too. It's like a lot of the times I get that I have to go deeper, but I don't know how to go deeper. What does that look like to go deeper? I have not practiced how to go deeper, right? So there's this practice piece that goes with that as well.
So what's that like? Tell me about that for a second.
Yeah. So going deeper, when I'm thinking about, if I have my employee in front of me, we can just talk about the weather, right? Or I can ask how graduation went this weekend, because I'm aware that graduation happened this weekend, right? So always having that relationship piece out in front, and how can I go deeper with this person? How can I create a deeper relationship? What does that look like? What's that next question? Again, it goes back to the empathy piece and just knowing that it's about the relationship, right? It's about the relationship. And so if I have a team of people, it's important for me to know the people. And I think a lot of leaders today, don't know how it's those EI skills. They don't know how to go deeper and ask that deeper question and listen in a deeper way.
It's interesting, the deeper Larry King, great, again, in our world and everything like that, Larry King said, and I remind myself every day that nothing I say today will teach me anything. So as long as that's the case, I might as well listen a little bit more. And it's funny because Diane Sawyer then followed up. She had, she was big on listening. And, she said, I think one lesson that I learned is that there's no substitute for really paying attention. So we need to listen more. So it's interesting that these professionals that were in a world of interviewing. Here's a great example, real life. Again, goes back to leadership. you have your agenda, right? I have to get this off my agenda. So if I'm at my agenda, I got to get through my agenda. And sometimes you move on too quickly because you're worried about getting through the series of questions or the series of items. And you realize that you're doing it and then now you're losing focus because you're trying to get through. You're only listening from it to get through, when in reality, if we went a little bit further, right, in that reflective and active listening, we can go into conversations that get into more quality control, profitability, retention of things, opportunities of cross-selling, opportunities of getting introductions. And we miss all of those in the professional world because we're trying to just achieve what's in front of us. It's not the great Gretzky, we all love the Wayne Gretzky story, the whole hockey puck one, but it is true in listening. People are listening to where they're listening currently, where they may want to be listening to where the conversation is going to go next. And that's the differentiation, of having a more meaningful dialogue, a more impactful conversation.
Yeah, so critical. It's so critical in today's leadership. I mean, even when you look at all the statistics for the reasons why people leave, the reasons why retention is what it is, engagement, all of the stuff, all of the metrics and the measurements that we see inside, a lot of them really go to exactly what you're talking about. Leaders really embracing the empathy, leaders embracing the EI, leaders embracing that, the deeper, like things like listening and stuff like that. So I love your topic. I love where you're going with all this, for sure.
It's so funny because that is, it's on everyone's mind, is retention. Today it's so hard because of competition out there. When they do studies in the wealth management area and they look at, like, in that financial industry, they do things. They say, what's the number one reason why relationships leave a professional advisor? And you would think, oh, maybe it was like performance or something like that. Hands down, every year it's communication, and my advisor was not listening to what was most important to me. I didn't feel like my advisor was hearing what we were trying to accomplish. And by the way, you can take that into any industry, a realtor or a law firm or an accounting firm. Yeah, sales 101. There's a great question. I share with leaders. Can I share like I call it my golden ticket question, okay?
Yes, I feel like we should have a drum roll.
That's if it's a good question. I'm not really sure.
Okay, good.
And it's in the book. It's amazing, and it's worked. It's something that I think opens up immediately. This goes back to, how do I get empathy? Especially if I am not really an empathetic person, or I haven't been using empathy, or I'd like to use it more. What's a great question that I can really open up the conversation? And this is how the question goes. What is most important to you with regards to relationship when you're on a podcast show, for example? Okay, what's most important to you with regards to a relationship with working on this project? And what happens is it lets the other person say to you, well, communication or trust and confidence or timely, and whatever the answer is. Instead of responding to them, which we are all used to doing. Oh, communication, we got great communication. We're the best communication. You stop and say, communication is a big area. Tell me more about that. Help me understand that. How would you define that? Yes, deeper.
Yes.
Yes, deeper. And all of a sudden, you go into this, communication looks like this. Now you're about to respond because you're you're the expert, okay, on communication.
Yeah.
Right, but you don't. You say, okay, communication is important. What else is most important to you with regard to working on this project or getting this contract or whatever it is, whatever the question is? And they'll say, you know what? Having someone that's credible, that I know I can come to and give feedback and get some opinion. Okay, well, that's a big area. So how does that look? How can we do that? And they go deeper. When they're done giving you 2 or 3 of the most important, you then formulate that as the key to the relationship. And now you have what's most important to them, not what's most important to you. And it changes the whole dialogue.
Yeah, it's crazy. I talk a lot about the golden rule and the platinum rule, just because I think it's funny, because the golden rule has been around forever, right? Do unto others as you'd have done unto you. But when I'm doing my training, I'm like, no, it's about the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would want done unto them. Like we've been trained and programmed in sales, that it should be one way and this way, when in fact, it's really about understanding the customer's vision. So sales 101 is knowing the customer's vision. And so often, what's that?
I'm writing this down. I like that
Yeah,
one.
that's awesome. And so often somebody sits down across the desk from us and we're like, let me tell you what I can sell you. I'm going to tell you everything about it. And here's all the nuts and bolts. And like, people are like, well, when you start with the customer's vision, it makes a big difference. Tell me what's important to you. So I love those questions. I think that's genius. It's amazing. I hope people are listening. And so if you're out there and customers are sitting down and the first thing you're talking to them is everything that you can sell them, understand that that's not what comes first.
Yeah, no, it's the discovery process, and it's utilizing the open-ended questions. When we sit down, a lot of times one of the first couple questions is before we even get started in terms like, tell me what are you trying to accomplish here, or what's important to you, or what's working, or what would you love to improve on? How do you all of those questions open up, and they start realizing, wow, you know what, we're actually sharing what this is what we were looking for, And I think that it's important. By the way, relationships, just real quickly, it works a lot on relationships. Better listening, okay? When you have like moms and children, dads and children, spouses and partners, when you have adult siblings that haven't talked for a long time, or you have like strained relationships because a political or religious or a cultural or a community, whatever the reasons are, that's like just strained a little bit or tough, try this, because what the feedback has been, especially with this, not just with this book, there's tons of books called Better, there's lots of Better Listening, okay? Yeah. But that empathy piece, which is right in chapter 7, that empathy piece seriously ties together what is right now hurting. Here's the reason why most family members are having a problem. It's because they're hurting. They don't want that. They really do want to have close relationships as much as they can. And someone says, oh, haven't talked to them in years, it doesn't work. No, that's not true. Yeah. We haven't been able to listen to each other and open up that dialogue. And the key is, how do we have a conversation so we get back to the Thanksgiving table? How do we get invited back to those graduations and those special, and engagements? And how we do that is we open up the communication and say, hey, you know what? It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to get back, okay, and open up that dialogue. And how do we do that? We do it through, some of the things that we talked about.
Yeah, beautiful. I love everything. I'm going to go buy this book. I have not bought it yet, but I want to. Now you got me curious about it.
I'll send you a copy.
Yeah. Everybody run and buy this book, because Better Listening is, I think you just said it in everything that you said. Like, and I was thinking it when we first started talking, this about relationship. Like, if you really want stronger, deeper relationships in your life, start listening. Start listening to what they want and stop trying to push what you want. Like, that's what I heard you say this full half hour.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So I mean, that my one feedback that we get all the time, person says is, you know what, it's so hard. It's so hard. Because it's like, because I want to just jump in. I just wanted to share. And the funny part is, it's okay to do that. But the concept is, if we could just push our response mode just a little later in the conversation. Yeah. In fact, next time you're with your friends, notice when you're all talking, you all are jumping in and the conversation gets louder and louder and louder, totally. Louder. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. We're competing for time, to talk. Yeah. When in reality, that's what's happening. A lot of times the person will step back and they'll ask a quick question, they'll pause, So a person said to me that read my book, they looked at me as a friend and he looks at me and goes, so where do you want to go for lunch? I go, oh, we'll go here, here, here. And the guy, and he looks at me, just stares at me, won't say anything. I'm like, like I said, we can go here for lunch. We can go there. And he's looking, he goes, I go, what's wrong? He goes, I'm pausing. I just want to make sure that you're done, that you've emptied your bucket, and that you've clearly made clear where you want to go for lunch before I respond.
Yeah, good. You're like, good. That's great. This is so much really amazing material. Where do people find you? Well, wait, first, before we go there, your leadership legacy. So I ask every guest that's on the show about their legacy, because legacy is something that we live, we create it as we're living, and it's with us after we go. So Stan, I would ask you, what legacy is it that you're intentional on leaving?
Wow. That's actually, that's a special question. I would say this. I think that at the end of the day, if someone was to remember me, hopefully other than just, good dad, good husband, good blah, 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 blah. I think if someone said, he wanted to pay forward the idea to have people have a better conversation, have a better communication, and have a better passionate, compassionate, and empathetic understanding of each other. And I think that he really took the time to push by doing this give forward, because he wanted us to hear each other. He wanted us to listen to each other. And he realized that if we can do just a little bit more, that it would maybe help us strengthen both our personal relationships and even some of the things that we're trying to accomplish. So that was my legacy.
Yeah, that's huge. It's so, like, talk about deep, right? Like, that's deep. I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine a world, because this work, the whether you want to call it emotional intelligent work, empathy, whatever you want to call it, the soft skills, whatever, I think that they are super important in today's time. We are living in a noisy, busy, crazy time where everyone's trying to be right. And the tools that you laid out within this last half hour, I believe, are the tools that will change the world. I really do believe that. Imagine a world where everybody was listening with empathy.
Yes.
I mean,
Thank
imagine
you.
that world, Stan. Like, that's a world where we respect our differences, where we can work through conflict, where we can communicate at a masterful level. So I honor you for this work. It's amazing stuff. And everybody go buy Stan's book right now. Better Listening, right?
Better listening. Yes. Thank you so much for the kind words. Seriously, thank you. That's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for
So-
being on. Yeah.
So where do they find it? Really
Yeah,
quickly?
where do they find you?
It's easy, really easy. They can just go to Amazon. Okay, go to Amazon. It's it's called betterlisteningbook.com. That's my website. You could just go to Amazon or any place pretty much and just punch in Better Listening with my name. And if you do get a chance to read it, I would love to hear feedback. If you picked up one nugget or one great story example, please share that with me, because that's what I want to pay forward and help others also benefit. So thank you so much for having me on Leadership Legacy. It was great. So much.
Yes, Stan, it has been a pleasure to meet you and to get to know you and everything that goes with it. So thank you so much for being on. You're incredible.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. That concludes this episode of Your Leadership Legacy. Join us next time. We'll talk later. Bye.
My name is Tina Paulus Krause, and I thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Check out our programs and events at trueyouteams.com. And until next time, make it an amazing day.